Well, good morning. Welcome back to the shop. Today's Monday, President's Day, February 17, 2020, and had a late night last night getting this project done for Concordia, which is a new shelf and hold-down mechanism for the house bank, where it's going to have its new home in the aft head underneath the vanity countertop. One of the design challenges with this project is that in the space it's going to go in, everything has to go through a door that measures about 15 inches tall and 12 inches wide. So each battery obviously goes in one by one, and so does the tray. And what I'm going to have to do is build a shelf inside the space that's 15 inches wide, hopefully, and 27 inches deep. It can go longer or shorter, depends on your design needs. I think Concordia could probably go upwards of 32 inches, 33 inches. Under the design parameters, I have to be able to slide the batteries in, because I can't get to the back side of it because the clearance is inside. All the hold down mechanisms have to attach to the back but be accessible from the front. So to do that, the design that I came up with is to have a threaded rod. These are 3/8 stainless steel rod that go back to a 1/4 inch stainless steel plate with a bolt welded on the back end, and then there's a bolt welded onto the tip of the threaded rod, and I simply just put a box wrench on it, unscrew it, screw it back in. This keeps the batteries from essentially lifting up if you hit a big wave. Part of the hold down setup here is I have a piece of stainless steel that I had from an old landscaping job that I ripped it was a 2-inch wide by a 1/4 inch thick piece of stock. I ripped it in half with a metal cutting blade on my circular saw and cut off some tips and made some tabs here, which I then cut to fit with with the saw again, and then a grinder to make these little V depressions that cause this to use the pressure of, as this gets tightened, the rod flattens out, and then it pushes down onto these tabs, and the threads from the on the rod serve as friction, keep this from moving back and forth. So that worked out really well. And then to keep the battery bank, because it's going to be on the port side of the boat, when the boat, obviously is on a port tack, everything's leaning forward, and you don't want the whole battery system to slide out. So that holds that here. It keeps it from sliding in two ways. One is this top bracket, and this will keep it from sliding this way. And then to keep this top bracket from essentially popping up, I have another 1/4 inch piece of steel at the bottom here that is bolted to the bottom. Each of these straps are held in place with a 1/4 inch stainless steel nut with a 1/4 inch stainless steel bolt with a star nut on the inside, and each of them have washers and lock washers to hold it in place. Now, I'll go through the build sequence. First off, anyone that's a welder would probably see that I am not a talented welder. If my family decided to have fun with me, they'd say, "I've seen your welds, you're getting a grinder for Christmas." The TIG welder, that was the second time that I've used the TIG welder, and the first time it was windy, never really worked, and I just went back to the MIG side. But I needed to have this done with a stainless steel rod so that everything stays corrosion free. Because of that, I'm also forgetful on things, what you need to do when you're welding, and so I did rack up my right hand a bit. There's a pretty good sized blister right here, a cut there. Most of that's from, I'm right-handed, so I was using just my bare hand to operate the TIG welder, and then I'd have a glove on the other hand. The other hand's just fine, and then I'd forget sometimes the hot metal. I'd grab the metal, and so this is actually a heat blister. that popped last night, so it's a little sore. So we'll go through the design now. So one of my original concepts was to have the hold down mechanism up here actually be 4 2-inch square by 2-inch long by 1.5 inch wide pads that were attached with a long nut, stainless steel nut that would be welded to them, and they would essentially ride on the threaded rod. Concept was good, the welder was bad. Essentially, just as I attached all 4 of them to the plate that I intended to cut into pieces with the threaded rod, I got it all mounted together and started welding, and didn't really realize just how thin wall, I really didn't look, these nuts are. And so I essentially welded them to the threaded rod. So, you know, those nuts are like $5.25 a piece, so wasted, and then the stainless, wasted about $25 worth of stainless there, but that's what you get when you're working the things on the fly. That's what came up with this other concept here with the essentially a strap with tabs on the ends and a V to hold them in place. The bulk of the material here, this is that 3/8 inch angle iron that I bought over at Metal Mart here out in Rancho Cordova. Cut it down. I made an opening here in one end to not obstruct or get in the way of these posts. Some of you may be thinking, well, what happens if anything shifts? Is it going to touch the stainless here? And if it does, that's okay, because, well, for one thing, it's either going to touch one or the other, and the other thing is these are both positive ends here, so it's not going to cause arcing. It's just going to essentially increase the voltage. So not a big deal on that. I learned my lesson from the straps here, so when I tack welded on the nuts onto here, and the concept with these is that I would weld these on, and then I would just drill out the threads so that the bolt would ride on the inside of the nut itself. I did overcook these a little bit too, but because I was mindful of my prior mistake, and just drilled them out and it was fine. And so these essentially serve as sleeves. And so all of that came together pretty well. I ground down the welds. They still look kind of ugly, but it's going inside a cabinet. Who's going to care? The last pieces on these straps that are on the front and back, I wound up doing just a standard nut on there. I had thought about just doing an eye lock, but obviously when you start heating up the welding on the nut, you're just going to burn off the nylon that's inside the nut. So those are just welded on, and because of just the heat from the torch and just my clumsiness, I did wind up over welding those a little bit too, and so I needed to get a tap, a 3/8 tap with the 16-point threads, and went through and just made these cleaned up the threads so that everything slides in back and forth. So that worked out of the project. Things I would do differently the next go around, instead of these threaded nuts, I should have just done some tabs out of stainless steel, drilled them out to 3/8 inch, and then just to use those. That would have been much better. My original idea was to have everything inside of a like a 5/8 to 3/4 inch stainless steel tube, and so actually the threaded rod would have been inside of a stainless steel tube, but I couldn't find any of that material. It's easy to get mild steel, but on a weekend it's really hard to find any stainless. Metal Mart was the only one that had any reasonable supply. So that's about it for this project.